The Where We Can Agree stream is now live. I'm the cul-de-sac hero, and my co-host, as always, is Greg Swan. Good
Very
morning.
delighted to be here. Good morning.
It's a
There's
lovely.
Cleo.
There's Cleo, the wonderful dog. Has to let herself be heard. It's good. I love dogs in the background
There's
of
there's no
podcasts.
escaping it. At our house, there's no escaping it. There may be a cat joining us soon. My wife is taking care of a cat for a woman who is literally dying right now, and so the cat may end up living here. I thought we were rid of cats, but oh well.
Cats are cool too. I prefer dogs myself, but cats are very, very cool.
If you watch any of my old videos, you will. There are two cats who appear one or the other in virtually every video. They just make an appearance. They typically don't make a lot of noise, unlike the dogs. And Cleo's a guest, but she's here every weekend. So if you're watching this show, you're probably going to hear Cleo making noise. With luck, she won't bark at some imaginary threat.
Hmm. Well, I have no animals in the house other than the teenagers and my wife. You may hear their noise because I'm in the basement here, just below the kitchen. So when somebody starts to run water, do dishes or something, it can get a little bit noisy here. But that's about the only noise you'll find will intrude from my end.
Unbelievable abasement.
Yes,
There are almost no basements in Phoenix, almost none.
there's
Um,
no. I always wonder about that. These places where there's so many tornadoes, and I believe Arizona is sort of a tornado.
we don't get
No,
tornadoes, but we get very, very high winds in the late summer. You can take the roof off of houses, literally suck the roof right off a house.
yeah. Well, there is a tornado risk here, and they always told us to go hide in the basement. And then I think about the places like in southern states where they just don't have basements, and what are they supposed to do? Oh my god! But if you are joining us, the purpose of this stream, the reason I've asked Greg to join me on this journey is to discuss and explore ideas about what it takes to be a man, a father, a human being of any kind, of any sex or gender, and what we need to do to be our best in this world of Marxist chaos. Just to say, to point one thing out that is definitely a threat, but there are many threats in this world, and how are we to defend ourselves? Well, how are we supposed to help ourselves as individuals, as family people, as members of? I believe we're members of tribes, whether we admit it or acknowledge it or not. Um, but I think that the first thing we need to do in order to have these types of discussions is to find area where we can agree. So that's where I discovered the name, or came up with the name. Um, Greg had a concept when I first started reading selfadoration.com and started reading his books. One of his tenements, am I using that word correctly, of the Church of Splendor was not, I'm not arguing with you. And I thought that's just to give you a little bit of background where I get this idea from. It's from Greg, that arguing is not very productive, I find. And when you find yourself in a situation and somebody starts to argue with you, and it gets argumentative, just step back and say, we're not having an argument here, right? Well, let's start, take a step back and find out where the facts lie, where we can agree, and then move from there. And I find it generally, we will find that this does tend to make more productive discussion.
Or eliminate the people who cannot proceed productively. I mean, that literally, unfortunately, that's the case, that if you're engaged in online pugilism, there's way too much pugilism. And that really doesn't move you anywhere. I am not arguing with you. It's rule number 2 of the World Church of Splendor. And maybe a better way of phrasing it would be, I am not quarreling with you, just to leave open the idea of philosophical argument, because there is room for back and forth, but where the back and forth becomes nothing but argumentative, nothing but quarrelsome, and especially nothing but ad hominem, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not moving the ball anywhere at all. And my particular approach is strictly broadcasting. I'm not really terribly interested in ping pong and back and forth. I am if there's real progress, if the other person is moving more my way, or if I'm moving more the other person's way, if there's real growth going on one way or the other, or both ways, ideally. But for the most part, there isn't. There's either just attaboy or go to hell. And attaboy is fun, I guess. It's nice to have a pat on the back, but it doesn't really cause any growth either. And go to hell, obviously, is just noise. It's just a rejection display. I like the term rejection display. It's worth thinking about when you're in a situation where you might be being invited to quarrel, is that people who are quarrelsome will approach you with a rejection display. They'll reject you first. They'll reject you before anything else. Instead of saying, hey, wow, that's an interesting idea. Could it be that it's like this, or am I getting it wrong? That's the way to have a discussion. Instead, go to hell. Well, okay, that's fine. You just saved me a lot of time. I know that I can't grow with you. You can't grow with me. So we're better off apart.
Yeah, exactly. You shouldn't waste your time with people who are not going to at least give you a benefit, or they're going to get
emotional. I mean, literally be an egoist. That the worst kind of altruism is being bountiful and beneficent with gifts that someone else doesn't want, like your ideas. If they don't want them, just press on. It's cool. There are other people who do, or maybe there's nobody who does. Maybe that's okay too. But it's not, charity by force is not charity. And I'm not a big fan of charity in any case, but ramming my ideas down your throat, that's not going to work. No one was ever scolded or scorned into better behavior, is what I say.
Which, to bring up a recent events that seem to highlight this type of behavior. And sorry, I didn't bring this up, Greg, not to throw anything at you.
Totally cool.
Recently, well, there was a shooting, but we would also say that I want to take it to something a little less extreme. The example of the swimmer Riley Gaines was giving a speech and was assaulted and rudely shouted down by people who will not entertain the other side's ideas, and they demand absolute agreement with what their side is. And these are the transgender ideologues. The thing with transgenderism is that they demand of the rest of the world to affirm their position and their desire, what they see themselves as. And nobody can demand any thought from someone else. I can't reach into your brain and say, here's
even if you demand it, you can't pause it. Even literally, if you stand there with a gun in your hand, respect me or else, you go fuck yourself, asshole. Go ahead and shoot me. I don't give a fuck. Why would I want to live kneeling before a dumb fuck like you? I mean, that would be my answer. Now we're all over the F-bombs. I don't know what that does to YouTube or monetization. I may be costing you all the advertising. I'm sorry.
Well, we haven't monetized yet. I don't see the point.
I know. I'm just teasing.
Whatever. Hopefully we can draw a few followers and build from there. But for now, yeah, F-bombs is how I respond to that when somebody says, believe me or else. This is how I see me, and you must see me the same way. Go fuck yourself. Honestly, there's nothing that can make another person. People will say it, but nobody really believes it. Even then, Matt Walsh had an amazing speech. I recommend you go. I lost it on my Twitter page feed because it refreshed, and after I watched it like 3 times, and one of the little bugs in Twitter is you hit you go back to the original post and it refreshes and it disappears forever. And
Somebody commented and it went to the top of the feed.
yeah.
I watched them vanish. I mean, it's jQuery. This actually, we should talk about this sometime. That JavaScript is amazing, and jQuery is a superset of JavaScript. There may be other things other than jQuery by now that do the same thing, but jQuery is what causes web pages to change while you're watching them. So you're scrolling, and you get to the bottom, and then suddenly new content appears below that. That's auto scrolling. It's done by jQuery. It's literally a search and replace that happens when you get to the bottom of the page. But jQuery can do all kinds of stuff. It can literally do Brave New World stuff that, change all the contents of all the web pages that you're seeing without you even knowing it. Change every reference to Biden to a reference to Trump, for instance. Can be done with jQuery easily enough. And somebody puts what do you call it? I forget what you call those little add-ons on your browser, but they put a little browser add-on on your browser, and suddenly you're being fed misinformation by your browser that no one else sees, uniquely you. I mean, if they do it through the jQuery in the web page, then everybody sees it. But if somebody does it just on your browser, this is completely off the topic. But going back to the trans terrorism is what we should call it, the way that we should think of it. And trans terrorism is a brand new thing under the sun, in the sense that it is the further perfection of Islamic terrorism. That Islamic terrorism was basically free in the West, particularly in the United States, to effect its destruction. And as soon as it did, everyone had to pretend to be mystified about the motive. No one could ever know the motive of terrorism committed by someone who immigrated illegally from Syria and has the first name Muhammad. We can't possibly guess what his motive might have been for killing all of those non-Muslims. But trans terrorism is an improvement upon that, in the sense that not only can you not guess at the motive, you can't speculate about the motive, but at the same time, you must celebrate it. This is amazing that we now have the celebration of mass murder, de facto celebration of mass murder, even as we refuse to understand why it happened, that they deserved it. And nevertheless, we can't possibly guess why they got what they deserved. Unbelievable. This is truly amazing, something brand new. And from the left's point of view, this may be the perfect form of terrorism. This may be the perfect way of killing kids, killing Christians, putting everyone to the right of Jane Fonda on notice that if they dare to say anything in public, it'll happen to them. And meanwhile, having the terrorists completely celebrated by the president, the mainstream media, the commercial entities like Budweiser, et cetera. I mean, what a perfect week for Budweiser to celebrate so-called trans identity after these murders. And that literally is the case, that we are now obliged to celebrate the people who are killing Christians. And that literally is what's happening. They're killing Christians in particular. And so were the Muslims. But the Muslims weren't members of a Marxist protected class. I always thought maybe the Marxists and the Muslims would merge, but now it looks more like maybe the Bronze Age perverts and the Muslims are going to merge.
The Bronze Age perverts and the Muslims.
That you see it all the time, that the Muslims were right, Muslims are right, Muslims are right. You see it from the Bronze Age pervert types of He-Man woman haters on the internet.
The Muslims are right about women.
About women and about homosexuals.
Yeah. It's a bit of a troll. I don't think everybody who says that believes it.
I don't think so either.
They don't believe that.
We know a doctor, a surgeon, Muslim surgeon, brilliant man, obviously brilliant man. Grew up in Riyadh, had, you know, the perfect education under the Union Jack. Everybody educated under the Union Jack is far better off than everyone who isn't, and he definitely was. So educated in essentially Jesuit schools, although they were Church of England schools, got that education, had a marvelous undergraduate education, came here for medical school, working as a surgeon here in Phoenix, and moved his family to Dallas and was doing very well there. But they had 4 kids by then. God bless them. You know, how do you get 4 kids, be a doctor, have a 7-figure income? They had 4 kids by then, and mom was overwhelmed. She was born here, not Muslim. And she was overwhelmed. And he said, well, the only way that we're going to get the kind of help that you're looking for in raising the children is to go to Riyadh. And so they moved back to Saudi Arabia, and they were there for about a year. And at one point, he got pulled over by a traffic cop and gave the traffic cop the finger and got written up for a religious violation. And just after that, they moved back to Dallas. He was no longer fit to live in Saudi Arabia. He was too American for that.
Little not deferential to authority enough. Is that what you're saying?
Just too American, literally too much of a Cumberlander. I love the Cumberlanders. They're what made America great. These are the driven individuals, not the CS pioneers. The CS settlers are what settled Middle America and all of Canada, especially the western provinces of Canada. But North America was pioneered by driven men, by D, not C. And those guys were unstoppable. The Cumberlanders were among them. They were not the only ones, but they were a significant portion. And these are the guys who pushed through the Cumberland Gap. Why they call it the Cumberland Gap? This is from Scotland, but they're calling it the Cumberland Gap. Everywhere they went, they named something Cumberland. It happens in Canada too. There's a bunch of things named Cumberland in Canada for the same reason, because these people were here and they named where they went after the old country. But they were stubborn, often pig ignorant, largely drunken, very hardworking people who wouldn't take shit from anyone. And they are the spirit of America. They still are. If you drive on our freeways in the United States, I say this to people, put yourself at 4 miles an hour above the speed limit on the cruise control. So if it's 55, put yourself at 59. If it's 65, go to 69. Put yourself 4 miles above the speed limit. Everyone who is passing you is a Cumberlander. And the ones who give you the finger as they pass you can find a reason to shoot you. And I think that's worth bearing in mind when talking about America. American pioneer stock, American white people, when you're talking about the people who pioneered and settled America, they came here because they were sick to death of taking shit from morons. And that's still a part of our culture, still a part of our civilization. And God help us, they will kick the dog hard enough that it will come out. And when it does, they may be surprised at how hard it comes out. Good Lord, we're not talking about anything that was in your
Cumberlanders. This is amazing. I've never heard of I've never heard
it's
of.
It's not even me. I forget. Oh, it's Joe Bob Briggs.
I know.
And he wrote this for Talking Mag a long time ago. And the page is still there. If you go to Talking Mag and search for Cumberland, you'll find it. But the HTML is all messed up, so it's difficult to read. But it's really a great argument. It's talking about Dutch, English, Irish, Scots, rebels who kind of all got lumped together into northern Scotland for a while, and then they started shipping them off to the New World to get rid of them. This is what they ultimately did in Australia also. This is England hung felons forever. Committed of a felony crime, you were hung almost immediately. And when they got merciful, they started shipping them out instead. And that was the whole lot of the American pioneers came here involuntarily. But they were already hard-headed, hard-working assholes. I mean, they were tough SOBs already because they had been rebels forever. They'd been rebels for 500 years. And, you know, successfully in rebellion because they were living in the hinterlands. They were far, far away from the people who wanted to push them around. But as populations grew, here comes the busybodies, and the Cumberlanders hated them. These are the hill people in America, what you think of as hillbillies, the moonshiners, the stock car racers. The, you know, redneck America is Cumberlanders, is people who were hated by their government for 500 years, and finally their government shipped them to the New World to get rid of them, where almost immediately the new government in the New World hated them too, and they just kept moving west. This is the westward migration is largely driven by Cumberlanders to get away from busybodies, to get away from people who were trying to push them around. The Whiskey Rebellion was George Washington and the newly formed government of the United States trying to put a Cumberlander, not even a rebellion. What it was they were in a state of tax evasion. There was a tax on whiskey sold by the gallon and a different tax on whiskey sold by the barrel. And the people who sold whiskey by the barrel wanted the people who sold it by the gallon put out of business. And that was what Washington was doing, strictly a rent-seeking occupation of what we now call West Virginia, of the Cumberland Gap. But the people who were proper English settlers, more C than D, relinquished, surrendered, gave in to the domination by the federal government, and the true Cumberlanders said, "Fuck you, Jasper," and they just went west. And they went as far west as Louisville, and they invented bourbon. That's how we have bourbon, is because George Washington wanted to shut down the distillers who were working in the Cumberland Gap. The history of America is full of crimes like that, and only libertarians know about them. But
crime avoidance of punishment is a big driver of human evolution.
Absolutely, and it's stupid. This is literally stupid. This is a complete economic waste. That avoiding taxes, avoiding regulations, avoiding interference is nothing but wasted activity. It's literally economically wasted activity. It's a huge source of poverty just by destroying waste that otherwise could have been destroying wealth that otherwise could have been created.
So, what do you feel about banning of TikTok? I mean,
I think it's dumb, and I don't care about TikTok, and I don't care about TikTok's data gathering, and I'm convinced that the Chinese know everything they want to know about everybody already, so it really doesn't make any difference. The Restrict Act is the more interesting question, and the Restrict Act is just tyranny in action. It's more of the Patriot Act. It's the Patriot Act on steroids.
Making more tyranny in the guise of protection and national security.
It's what they do all the time. Is they create a fear and then they present the solution to the fear. This is, I think, one of the things that I like about Twitter, the way I'm seeing it now compared to the way I've seen it before, is how much better people understand the Marxist dialectic, not as an alleged philosophical argument, but just as a political trick, as a means of maneuvering people. So you engender their fear of TikTok. TikTok is raping all your data, and suddenly it's going to be in your bedroom in the middle of the night holding an axe right over your head. What are we going to do about TikTok? It's stupid. Don't do anything. If you're afraid about TikTok, kill it from your phone. If you don't want it turning your kid into a monster, don't give your kid a phone. Don't give your kid a tablet. Shoot your television. I have a friend, trad dad, very trad dad, but he's in love with, I forget the name of it. Ancient John Prine song, one of the first John Prine songs, but blow up your TV. That's the refrain from the song. Blow up your TV, eat a lot of peaches, try to find Jesus on your own. It's about becoming a trad dad. That's literally what the song is about rejecting modernity and going to become a trad dad with this ideal woman that he meets in the song. But he quotes lyrics from that song all the time, and I think that he thinks that nobody else knows what he's doing. I love it. I think it's funny. And so I'll respond appropriately, and nobody else knows what he's talking about. He says, eat a lot of peaches. And what does that mean? Well, he's just quoting from the song. And I think maybe the song is referencing the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, but who knows? Same thing for Eat a Peach by the Allman Brothers. Is that referring to Prufrock? But where were we going with this?
I don't know, but one thing I would have to say about it, if you really want to protect your kids, don't try to ban TikTok or take away their phone.
Really?
I think, well, there's an age when they're going to need a phone, and you're going to want them to have a phone.
I see that we're in a middle place. You and I both are in a middle place because we both live in in this world. We live in this. We're on the internet right now. We're on YouTube right now. We are living in the on the grid world.
Teaching,
But parents who are looking to shield their children from those pernicious influences really have to shield them from all of them. They really do have to be trad dads. And that's kind of funny for us to even be talking about this, because we're talking to people on the internet and telling them that your only safety is to be off the internet, to be away from the television, to be away from all of this electronic stuff. It's not just me saying that. There are a lot of people saying that.
But I mean, there's another strategy that is just as important, is strengthening your kids. How much are you going to get into their brain before they're exposed to these ideas? Because it will happen sooner or later.
Right. And really, you've got the first 5 years is your miracle hour. If you can keep them away from the television then, because you can do everything you need done in the first 5 years, and then they will run properly, as it were, from then on. Augustine said that, and so did Lenin. They meant different things than I do, but it's still the same idea, that period between babyhood and childhood, the toddler years, are utterly amazing for establishing lifelong habits.
Teaching them how to control their themselves, and it's different for every kid. Believe me, I have two. They were very, 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 very different. But getting that idea into their head, even if they're not all that successful at achieving control, but getting that idea that they can control their minds, they can control their emotions to a point, they can control that. But even if they lose control of their emotions, they can control their actions,
right,
and their words. And if they have that idea when they're 2, 3, that there's an expectation that they will behave in a certain way, and they're not going to be allowed to do things that hurt other people or damage things, that there will be consequences, they will learn it. And you said something about expectations last time, and it reminded me of a thought that I always had, that kids will behave as well as they're expected to.
Yes.
If you don't give them guidelines, if you don't give them that teaching at the very young age, then they don't understand that. Doesn't matter if they run out into the street. It doesn't matter if they could hurt themselves, they could hurt other people. But that idea, it has to get in there young. And then the next stage at 5, after they've realized that they are a person, it's about exploring who they are and what the world is about, and how they can adjust themselves to fit the world, and where they can change the world. And we are going to change the world.
Yep. So, all right, I don't have your notes in front of me, but you referenced an idea in the notes that you sent me about the theft of fatherhood. Is that concept yours? Did you come up with that idea?
It's just being introduced to the world now, from my, according to my knowledge. As far as I can tell, this is completely my idea. I didn't heard it from anywhere else, but I thought about
You're so modest.
I don't want to. There's nothing new under the sun, Mr. Swan. I think.
No, this is. I mean, believe me, this is new to me. I've been thinking about fathers' rights for 30 years, and I kind of read everything along the way. David Blankenship. I think that's his name. Unfathered America, and he mentioned ways that children lose their fathers, and one of the ways that he mentioned, the way that he says is best, and I think he's right, is for a child to lose a father by death. In other words, dad dies, mom becomes a widow. This is the best way for children to lose a father, because there's no incurring rancor or acrimony from mom. To the contrary, she uses dad as her ultimate club from then on. What would your father think? But this idea of father theft is new to me, and I think it's great. I think it's really excellent. So talk about what you've got. You've got it up there on the screen. Talk about what you're thinking about.
Yeah, well, it came to me from my own experience and my own father. And his father fought in World War II. and he was a young boy at that age, and he kept telling me about these things that um, bothered him during this period of time when he didn't have a father, and mostly what he complained about, because my father was a great fisherman. He loved to go fishing, and I think when his father left for the war, I think he'd taken him fishing a number of times, so he would always go down to the local stream, and he talked about all the fish he missed that he couldn't catch because he didn't have a father there to teach him. And I think it caused great pain in my father, um, and it passed it on. But he passed this idea on to me by just telling me these stories about fishing and missing all this fish, because that's all he would do every day. Um, whenever he had time off, he would off from school, he would go down fishing, and his father was off at war. And I thought he was really stolen. His father was really stolen from him to go off to the other side of the ocean and fight in the war. And he was there for 4 years. Canada was into the war the same time that England was. And he stayed there even after the war to rebuild. And that doesn't even account for the amount of psychological stress that war causes. So when the fathers do return home, they're damaged people.
Yep.
A lot of cases suffering from emotional scars of what happened, what they saw, what they did while they were at war.
Yep.
So I thought about other ways that fathers are stolen. And I'm just trying to hash this idea out live here on the internet. It's an institutional theft. The institution, the state is stealing your father from you and then stealing your ability to father. So it becomes there's the immediate act of taking your father off to war or to work. You mentioned last time working in factories and stuff is taking the father out of the home. But divorce is another way that the father is stolen. And there's another more pernicious act, which is the educational and cultural alienation. And now I think of this as my father didn't have the tools to fight against Marxism that was being shoved down my throat when I was a young boy. I didn't realize it. He didn't realize the extent to which it was going.
Right.
But it's only gotten orders of magnitude greater since then. And once you start with these immediate acts of taking the father away, of stealing your father, it becomes a generational act. Welfare being the most common, I believe, and welfare takes the mother doesn't need the father around. In fact, having the father, especially one that isn't economically advantaged, doesn't have he's not economically well endowed. He will kick the father out of the home so she can collect more welfare, and then have multiple fathers, and the whole thing becomes a generational issue with a mother with multiple kids from multiple fathers being raised without a strong male role model. And then this leads to at least the boys fall into gangs and end up in prison and fathering their own kids, and just continuing this welfare to prison cycle. It's a generational theft of the father. And now the educational cultural side of things, it started with alienation, right? Where they just tried to alienate you from your parental culture and what your parental rights. And it's going into this educational cultural destruction. And now our culture is just being eradicated and replaced by a globalist. And globalist isn't necessarily the best word, but it is a authority world, this corporatist government amalgamation that wants to be your only parent, wants to be everything to you, and take away your parents and your, especially the father. So this is what we're living through. And I just threw this little slide together this morning because it just dawned on me, what am I going to talk about? And this is the one thing that I think is the biggest problem in our world.
It really is. It's a brilliant observation because, the generational aspect we've been talking about for a long time, multi-generational welfare, et cetera, and creating a culture of welfare, creating a culture that not only doesn't depend on fathers, and not only just actively rejects them, but doesn't see the need for them, period. In other words, every family is a fishbowl, and in the generational welfare families, the water in the fishbowls doesn't even support fathers. Fathers can't breathe in that water. It's a fatherless water. It's a completely fatherless culture that has been created strictly by subsidy. But the top category, the immediate theft of fatherhood is something that really needs to be looked at, outside of the context of divorce and family court. But just as you mentioned, work and war, both of which are ancient. These are paleo alienations of fathers from their children. The tribal systems that we deride when we're talking about the Longhouse, et cetera, they were already doing those things. Men were disappearing for weeks at a time to go on hunts or to engage in warfare with neighboring tribes. Men would get wiped out in those wars. The women and children might be enslaved, might be killed, or might be absorbed into the victorious tribe. But human civilization, human social contact, we shouldn't call it civilization, human social contact going back forever has been extremely wasteful of fathers. And genetically, it's easy to understand why. You have 500 offspring in your little pocket, 500,000 offspring in your little pocket right now. And your wife, at her best, can pump out one egg a month. So her eggs are precious, obviously precious. And your sperm are massively expendable, extremely expendable, because one guy, 50 women, that's 50 kids next year. 50 guys, one woman, that's nobody left. Everybody's dead. Mm-hmm. All the guys kill each other. They kill the woman in the process, kill all the children. Everybody's dead. That's Pitcairn's Island. It's already happened. We know how it works out. But we are culturally forever. Every culture that we can look at, I should think, is probably going to come out pretty hostile to the idea of keeping fathers around to raise their children, that we're much happier to send fathers off on business, off to war, off to the tap room, off to the whorehouse, off to the casino. Fathers do their best work at home, and we're happiest to have fathers anywhere else. And that's prior to government. That's not, it's made worse by government, and obviously it's government policy, but it's been human policy for as long as we've been able to keep track of human policy. So
it's a natural human.
Nothing of humanity is natural. It's philosophical in origin, but the philosophy is consonant with our biological nature, but it's literally consonant with the need of would-be oligarchs to take power. Yeah. It's how they do it, is by enlisting other men to participate in their crusades, whatever they are, whether it's war, business, or dissipation, like the Bronze Age, whatever he's called, primitive, or the other PUA idiots. There's all kinds of examples of male leadership, some of them good, some of them bad, but a whole lot of them are leading men away from their families, a whole lot of them.
Yeah. So it's
interesting. This is really fascinating. This is something new under the sun. You need to pat yourself on the back. You need to go tell your wife and kids that they're living with a brilliant person. They need to show you greater deference.
I'll put this in my first book. It's underway. It's perpetually underway. But this we had a comment last week or 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks ago from James Pruitt, because he liked how we brought up that Marxism is feminine. I'm trying to figure out how to work this in, and it just dawned on me that this globalist, corporatist, uni authority that is
An
trying,
adult woman can have a husband or a pimp.
yeah. So
And
it wants to be the ultimate father, but
it wants to be the pimp. It doesn't want to be the father. It wants to be the pimp. It wants to give her an excuse not to be married, not to be committed to her marriage, not to be committed to keeping her marriage together for the sake of her children. It literally exists to convince her that men are expendable. And I was thinking about this morning. Do you know the idea of milling? This is showing up a lot in Twitter right now. In subsidized culture, subsidized tribal situations like the Maori in Australia or New Zealand or sub-Saharan Africa, where people don't do hunting and gathering, they don't do animal husbandry, they don't do agriculture, they don't really do anything for a living except hang around in town centers waiting for something to happen, waiting to beg enough cash to buy a meal or for someone to give them a handout or something like that. But otherwise, they just kind of hang around, and it's described as being milling, literally milling around.
Milling around, okay.
I don't think this is possible without the subsidies. In the same way, I don't think that the longhouse is possible without subsidies somewhere that aren't being talked about. The literal longhouse, not the metaphor that people are using, but the so-called tribal longhouses. I don't think that they could exist without subsidies that we're not taking account of, because the world is hard. The world is harsh, and survival in that harsh world requires masculine energy, masculine efforts, and masculine violence. And so when you find women who are successfully rearing their children without men, it's happening because there's a pimp involved somewhere. If she doesn't have a husband, she has a pimp. And that's what the state and the corporate world are attempting to do. So, for instance, the corporate world, if you have a daughter, I mean, this is horrifying. I know a whole lot of people are in this situation right now. The daughters are just finishing school and they're going off into the corporate world. And a big piece of their benefits package when it's being explained to them is frozen eggs. We'll happily freeze your eggs for you so that when you're ready to be a mother, your eggs will be ready for you. Oh my goodness, this is horrifying. This is literally talking women out of reproduction. They will never reproduce. If they agree to do this at 24, by 44, they'll be convinced that they're going to do something, but they never will. It won't work. And this is just the pimp literally talking them out of everything that they wanted in their lives as women in exchange for life as a pretend man doing the same kind of stupid scut work men do, only you're doing it for some man other than your husband. You have a work husband that you work for all day, and then you go home to your real husband for whom you have no love, tolerance, or patience because your life is miserable.
Wow. As a cul-de-sac hero in a dual-income family, I can relate. I mean, it's difficult, but you're taking your time and your efforts. And my wife is amazing, beautiful, puts so much effort at home as well as at work. But it takes out the energy that should be here for the family. Again, I mentioned before, I would have structured my life completely differently if I had known what I know now. And I would recommend kids coming up, you young would-be possible fathers out there right now, and mothers, the male model of work is extremely difficult for women, especially women who want to become mothers.
Right.
The ideal model for a woman, a life model, what you should structure your life towards, is breeding in your early 20s, having children then, and you can return to school, return to work if you desire, after the children are starting to grow up and get into the, like we had both of our kids in daycare at one point. And as they started getting into school, it made things so stressful and so hectic, and maintaining that home life that we did, and we protected, and we fiercely protected and worked hard for, that was essential. But most people can't do it, and they end up relying on the Uber and relying on the food delivery system, and they don't make a home for themselves.
Right.
And there's so many people that are trapped in this. They've never learned how to cook, and they have to order every single, like, if you have to do it the way I did it, I have to stress, cook food at home, right? That is the key. This is the one single key that you must maintain. You can still go take out a couple of times, once or twice a week, and I know it's not going to be the fanciest meal every night. But like, especially when kids are doing activities and you're shuttling them here and there, but showing the kids how food is prepared is one of the most essential things you must do as a parent, because they will grow up and they will become dependent on the easy fast food meal and delivery service, and they're going to know lots about the different noodles that you can get at your Chinese takeout counter, but they're not going to know how to make a simple spaghetti sauce, or cook a steak on the barbecue. And it doesn't really matter who cooks. My family, my wife does almost all of the cooking. I do almost all of the grilling. But I help out here and there. I'm very handy in the kitchen. And you got to teach your boys and your girls how to do the home food prep, how to work.
You're going to live alone for a while, no matter what, boys or girls. There's going to be a time in your life where you're going to have to fend for yourself, and there's nobody going to be around to cook for you. You better learn how.
And I'm going to repeat this again. There's a million excuses to do the wrong thing. You can come up. There's an infinite number of excuses. You can come up with any excuse why you don't have time to buy some hamburger and potatoes and make a simple meal at home with a side of like frozen peas or greens or something like that. It's not that difficult, but people will choose you'll come up with a million excuses why they just got to turn on that Uber app, Uber Eats, or I keep one of those food delivery services, and just pick something up so that somebody will drop off outside their door.
When I grew up, I'm 63 years old. I'm a certified antique. When I grew up, everyone was strongly inculcated in the religion of hygiene. My grandparents grew up when typhoid fever was still common. They had a privy. They had, an outhouse. They had a leach field. In other words, I don't even know what you call this, but in other words, their sewage treatment was their backyard. Everyone that I grew up around was extremely serious about hygiene, because everybody knew someone who had died by having made a dumb and obvious mistake. We're now growing up. We're now living among people who can't read, can't write, can't reason, have been instructed in nothing but Marxism in one form or another. We wasted $100,000 in 18 years instructing these children in idiot Marxist theories, but they know nothing about anything particularly hygiene. I think eating out is insane. I think it's insane. I know a doctor who moved back from Riyadh. I know a guy who drives a truck for a co-packer for restaurants in Arizona, and his advice is, if the temperature is above 80 degrees, don't eat anything at a restaurant, because the food was never properly refrigerated. It can't be properly refrigerated in Arizona, just as you cannot get a hot meal in Toronto. I promise you, none at no season of the year will your food be hot enough for me. I mean, strictly temperate enough for me, because you live in a place where they have winter. We live in a place where we have no winter, and in the summer, the food never appropriately refrigerated in a restaurant. They can't get it cold enough.
Interesting.
So I don't trust the people to have washed their hands, and I don't trust the food. I certainly don't trust the driver. Every one of these things is a black box. I talked about black boxes earlier this week because of stupid AI crap that we're going through. But every one of these things is a black box. You have no way of knowing what's going on inside the system, except that you know that everyone around you is relatively untrustworthy compared to what you knew in the past. Did we run out of time?
We're coming up on an hour. I try to keep it under an hour. I think this is great though. Yeah, that black box is something you need to avoid. You can do so much stuff yourself. This is essential for maintaining your independence, right? And this is why the corporatist system wants you to go for convenience. You don't have to pick up that phone and pay your $50 for your nightly meal. You can do it in your own home. I don't care if you live in a tiny condo, bachelor apartment. It's got a kitchen. It's got heating elements, an oven.
I've done it. I lived in New York. I've done it with a heating pad, a dorm-sized refrigerator, and made meals for dates. Because if you want women to regard you as a potential marriage prospect, learn to cook. That's my best advice for guys who want to get married is learn to cook. It will separate the wheat from the chaff right away, and the ones that you want to be married to will be very, very amazed that you cooked a meal for them.
Yeah. So we didn't get to what we wanted. We never seem to get to everything that I want to touch on. But I hope the underlying theme is starting to surface, and that is like we're trying to help people prepare themselves to and achieve some kind of independence in a world where everything is interdependent. The household. I'm a cul-de-sac here. I don't live in an actual cul-de-sac, but I think I own my home and I'm still paying on the mortgage, but every property is in a sense a cul-de-sac, because the definition of cul-de-sac is a passage with one entry and one exit.
Right.
You come in my front door because I let you, right? This is my protected area, and this is where I've raised my family, and that's what we're trying to help people achieve, is that cell of their own, that not a cell, keep it from being a prison cell.
But from the inside out, this is the values, an appropriate values hierarchy, a values hierarchy that results in human thriving, emerges from the inside out. So it starts with yourself, it proceeds to your spouse, from there to your family, from there to your home, and only from there to your extended family, ultimately to your work, to the world outside your work, all of that. But it emerges from the inside out. I would say that, your goal as an egoist is to pursue your own interests. And that means all of your interests for all of your life, not any particular immediate pecuniary advantage. But you have two inescapable social roles that you fulfill, like it or don't. One, you are providing an example for everyone else, and it better had be a good example. But if it isn't, you're nevertheless doing it just by being alive. That by being alive and visible, the secondary consequences of your action are determinable by everyone else, and you are setting an example, like it or not. And the second social obligation that you have that you cannot escape is that you are the author of the future. You are one of 7-8 billion authors of the future, but you are literally authoring the future of humanity. And it's worth your while to think about what form you want that future to take, because you're going to do it whether you like it or not.
Take the reins, take control.
Exactly.
We have steering wheels now. And don't get me started on self-driving cars. Don't
We're
let
all
go.
driving our own lives, regardless of what else is going on in technology. Each one of us is driving our own lives. There is no alternative to that. There is no way to escape that.
Do not let go of that steering wheel, no matter what they tell you. Then they're trying to take it out of your way, out of your
Right.
hands in many different ways. So I think that's a great way to wrap this up. We won't take too much more time of everybody's day. I don't know how many people are going to watch this. So far,
Millions. I mean, it may be just a few today, but it adds up.
we're building something, and we're going to help you
Like, subscribe, inquire. We need the encouragement.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Greg.
Bless you. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.